Now, it's been a year since Zimbabwe ushered in a new era with someone other than Robert Mugabe as the country's president. Emmerson Mnagagwa is the new head of state, and in the run-up to the elections, he promised to revive and grow the national economy under the mantra, Zimbabwe is open for business. So, more than 3 months after his latest inauguration, has President Mnagagwa been able to turn the ship around? Well, joining us now is Zanu PF from the Zanu PF's Office of the Director for Investment and Economic Transformation, Tafadzwa E. Muguti. Thanks very much for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Peter, for having me. All right,
so look, at 31 years, 34 years of a struggling economy, perhaps particularly more in the last few decades, it does take time to turn things around. But the president did promise quite a lot of things. How would Zanu PF, the governing party, assess the progress so far?
Well, one thing that we have to understand, Peter, is that Zimbabwean economy is one of a kind. Over the last 30 years or so, we've seen a number of things happen. For instance, we were the largest manufacturing base outside South Africa and the whole continent. We used to compete with South Africa. We're the largest motor vehicle assembly plant outside SA. We had so much to offer with the breadbasket of Africa. And what has since happened is, of course, we've got the punitive sanctions that later on took place and everything else that has happened. But where we are currently, we're looking at a situation where Zimbabwe needs to get back to productivity, inland productivity. We are one of the largest importers on the continent. We import even bottled water. We import tissues. You name it, we bring it in.
And these were things that were manufactured?
These were things we used to give other nations. I remember growing up when the entire Zambian community would come every weekend to shop in Harare. I remember the milkmen dropping bottles at your gate and no one would take it. Electricity, no load shedding and so forth. We are going towards that period back again, but I believe that when a nation goes through the difficulties that we've gone through, two things mainly happen. Firstly, you lose your culture of doing things. Everyone who was employed at some point had to go back into business, had to go now into business, start learning new things that you've never actually been trained to do, and it becomes an art of survival. Getting back to normality and removing the abnormal, which is now normal, is something which is going to take a bit of time.
All right, so people will say, but hang on, Zanu PF was the party that created all of this. Is it the party that can rethink, outthink itself and do something different?
I think the greatest challenge we have in Africa, and I feel sorry for all African leaders, is that we basically compared with nations which have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. Zimbabwe, South Africa, a number of countries in Southern Africa, young democracies. We're still learning within the period of what we've gone through. A lot has happened, mistakes have been made, but I believe that right from the inauguration speech, our new president, Emmerson Mnagagwa, mentioned that, you know, this is a time for Zimbabwe to catch up with the rest of the world. That means that there is a will to actually close that gap.
So what has the average Zimbabwean been able to see and experience that he might call an improvement since the president's inauguration?
I think one of the things that we have done, not speaking on my colleagues on the political desk, I'm on the investment side, is that there's a fresh air of democracy in Zimbabwe. We have, for the first time, I look at some of the tweets that go on when people tweet to the president. That wouldn't happen in the last dispensation. And I believe that the president has really offered that new opportunity for people to be able to express themselves the way they want. And I believe that even for us young people now getting a chance to be able to serve our nation has been also the opportunity where you can actually see that there's the new atmosphere. One thing that we did get right straight after November last year is that there was a renewed sense of hope. A renewed sense of hope with a bit of non-expectation of what we're going through now. I'll give you a practical example, Peter, that Zimbabwe is one of the places where the abnormal has become normal. So instead of people going to the Bureau de Change to change money, people go to the bus terminus to change money. Right. And when you now want to change that culture where even businesses follow that suit, there's going to be a lot of friction, there's going to be a lot of confusion. And if you look at our markets, I'll give you an instance. We don't operate below 100% on any margin. In South Africa, if a company operates at 15%, we clap hands that they did a job well done.
All right, so I'm Mr. Investor.
Yes.
The elections have come and gone.
Yep.
In theory, we have certainty now of in the country. So what do I invest in, given the challenges around cash, that kind of thing? How do I invest in Zimbabwe? What do I invest in?
Well, I think the message we're calling out for investors, Zimbabwe is trying to remove itself from being one of the largest importers to be one of the largest exporters. Meaning that we're inward looking, we're trying to resuscitate our industry, and that itself presents a great opportunity for investment. We've got great demand for local products. Zimbabwe has got a strong agricultural backbone, meaning that the demand is there. There's a lot, and I think you know the story of the Zimbabwe labor force, which is something to be reckoned on the continent, even here in South Africa. So I believe that we're seeing great strides. Our mining sector has been growing. Tourism has been growing. We've seen a slight improvement in manufacturing. Politically, we still need to be able to now protect those industries. If someone brings their investment through, we don't have to now put policies which make it difficult for competitiveness. They need to be able to compete fairly. But
it is difficult for somebody to run a business when there's so many currencies floating around the system. You've got RTGs, you've got the US dollar and other currencies. How do you normalize this? Is this something that you're working towards? And if so, is there a timeline?
Yes, definitely. I can confirm to you that the government has since put in place what we call the Transitional Stabilization Program, which is basically from October last year to the first phase to 2020, and then therefore from 2021 to 2025 and 2026 to 2030. The vision is to basically make Zimbabwe a upper middle income economy by 2030, and I believe that it's possible. But one of the things that we're seeing currently is that we're using the US dollar. It is not our currency. The only way to generate more US dollars is to export. And if as a country we're not importing currently, and yet we're expecting things to normalize with a currency which is not ours, that's going to be very difficult.
But it does seem, and this is my last question to you,
Yeah.
it does seem that not everybody is convinced that progress is being made. We saw thousands of Zimbabweans converge on the streets in Harare yesterday, and part of their demands was that something needs to happen about the economic decline. What do you tell them?
Look, I think, to be fair, I think speaking from an economy point of view and not a political one, Zimbabwe's problems are not going to be solved overnight. We've just come out of our elections with a new president in place, a new cabinet in place. Let's give them a chance. I can promise you that one of the things that they've done right is that for the first time since independence, we've done something that most African governments can't do, is to separate government and politics. So we now have full-time, all our former ministers are full-time party employees, just like what you're doing in South Africa, and we've now put in cabinet. So there's a sense of accountability, which probably some time back could have been a problem. But I can assure you, with the likes of Professor Mtulinu coming across, myself and others, we are trying to change the culture of the country, the work ethic within government and within the party, and this is progress as the new generation starts to shape the future.
All right, Tafadzwa Muguti, we're going to have to leave it there, but hopefully we'll have more conversations in the future. Glad. Thanks very much indeed for coming through.
Thank you very much, Peter.
All right, so that was a word on progress being made in Zimbabwe, demonstrations being held yesterday by opposition party. But one of the things that is interesting is that recently, for the first time in ages, Zimbabwe's treasury was able to balance the country's books. In other words, they were actually earning as much as they were spending and not going the other way. So perhaps that is a sign of progress. We'll keep monitoring the situation there. We'll take a break now. More after this.